Hello, my name is Marion May, and in this video I'm going to talk about how I use the human design chart to understand how to help somebody heal from trauma. First off, I want to just explain this diagram here. It's a concept known as the window of tolerance that has come out of studies into neurobiology and our physiology. And we all know about fight-flight. That's our kind of stress response, which is where we go when we get overwhelmed by something or triggered by something from the past. And then when that doesn't work as a strategy to get ourselves safe, our nervous system takes us into the freeze response, which is where the body kind of freezes up, goes into stasis. This comes from our earliest mammalian biology. This is our strategy for survival. So it's absolutely essential to us that we have this. But what happens with trauma is that we get stuck in fight, flight, or we get reactivated time and again into fight, flight, or into freeze. So this window of tolerance is the green bit in the middle. And this is called homeostasis. And this is where everything in our body is really working like an orchestra. Everything's in harmony. Our heart is able to do its job well. Our nerves are doing their job well. Everything can heal, restore, digest. We can take in our world, process what we're taking in. We can retrieve memories to affect how we make decisions in the present moment. Everything is operating basically at optimal. With a little bit of variance, up and down, up and down. So what we're looking for with healing trauma is to be able to reconnect in this homeostasis level, to bring ourselves back out of fight, flight, or back up out of freeze, reactivate out of freeze, so that the body can come back to homeostasis. Now, because we're not all the same, this map is really too simplistic. So what I use a human design chart for, as you can see one here, is to really help somebody get back into their own inner authority. Now, human design is a system that you can look up on the internet if you want to. If you don't already know about it, get your own chart. But it comes up with this idea that there is an inner authority, which is where we make decisions as ourself. That guides us, keeps us on our path, on our correct trajectory through life, and enables us to function fully as ourselves. So when you get a chart, it will show your inner authority as being one of these centers, one of these names, or it will show something saying none, in which case that's for the type of a mental projector or a reflector. All right. So what I'm really going to talk about in this video now is about trauma that disrupts these inner authority centers. Now, whichever one you have, there's an innate sense in your body of how to guide yourself using that. So the most common is probably the solar plexus authority, this one on the right. And this is about emotional processing over time, bringing you to a sense of clarity. There's about 50% of the world's population at the moment has this as an authority. So when you can allow yourself enough time to go through this kind of like this homeostasis wave process, you come to a point of clarity about your decision, whether it's a yes or a no, or whether it's like, I don't know, I need more information. So that's the processing that enables people to guide themselves, guide their body into correct decisions, into correct relationships, into correct work experiences. Now, when I use the word correct here, I'm not like making this as an external authority that says this is right and this is wrong. What I'm meaning is it's correct for you. It's correct for your trajectory, your pathway through life. And this is something that nobody else can tell you. So as you can see all over the internet now, we've all become very divorced from this inner sense of trusting ourselves to know. Very much we've gone into let's ask somebody else, let's get some advice, let's get somebody else's opinion, rather than trusting ourselves to really know. So this is the core essence of human design, is how to restore your connection with this inner sense of guiding yourself, inner sense of entering into, making your own decisions, so you enter into the kinds of experiences that are going to be meaningful and purposeful and correct for you. Now, this doesn't mean that they're going to work out. It just means they're going to take you on your path through life. So for the solar plexus, this is this emotional processing over time. It can take a few hours or a few days, or sometimes even a few years, to get completely clear about a decision. So that's the solar plexus. Then let's talk about the sacral authority. This is the red square here. The sacral relates to sexual energy and vitality, inner vitality. And this is about a responding in the moment to what life is bringing to you, with the energy to engage or not. So it's almost like quite a simple binary. It almost goes, yeah, I have the energy, or this thing I don't have the energy for now. Doesn't mean that in 2 hours' time you're still going to be in the same place. So this is a really powerful center in the human design chart. Got a lot of energy in here. Then on the left we've got the spleen. This is about the survival instinct. It's our oldest awareness center. So it comes from our very early times. That ability to just be aware of the environment, so as you know what is healthy and how to move and how to survive. And it only works in the present moment. It doesn't work in the future or in the past, only now. Then there's the heart center. This is the center for willpower and commitment. And this is ability to feel that powerful sense of will inside that kind of says, I will do this. I will commit to this, as a way of making a decision. And then we have the G, or the self center, the yellow diamond. This has the themes of love, identity, and direction. So it's about knowing yourself, knowing your direction, and having an innate sense of love inside. And that's how decisions are made, feeling where the pull is in that sense of direction. So it's a bit like a GPS, it's a navigation system in a navigation system. So what happens when we have a traumatic experience that is not resolved? This is the key. So some people have sufficient resilience that they can go through all sorts of traumatic experiences and return to homeostasis. But not all traumas are like that, and not all people are as resilient. So if you have an unresolved trauma, it leaves an energetic, emotional shock imprint in the body. I think it's actually Dr. Robert Scare who described these as like trauma capsules. So it's like at the point you get completely overwhelmed, your body encapsulates and your mind encapsulates everything that is in that immediate situation. So your sense of smell, what you can see, what you're feeling emotionally, and even the meaning you're making out of it at that time, if you're making meaning out of it. Often trauma can disrupt the meaning making process too. So all those sensory inputs are all encapsulated, as in like kept in a little box. The idea being that when you get to safety, you can unpack the box, unpack the experience, because you're safe to feel all those things then, and then that's discharged from the body. But we tend to not do that stage of releasing it. So what happens when we get trauma in the body is we no longer trust our own ability. We no longer trust our body to signal to us what is right or what is healthy for us, what is correct for us, and to guide us. So we get into patterns of behavior and relationships that are ultimately dysfunctional, where we have lost that connection with our inner sense of knowing. So the body, if you like, is where we find our key values. It has some, at the very basic levels, there's almost like a primitive sense of you move towards, open up to something, or you close down and withdraw from something. And it has these very sort of primitive movements that are actually, when all the body is working beautifully, as I said, it's a beautiful orchestra. Everything is just functioning in complete harmony. But trauma comes in and disrupts this. So our ability to feel disgust at the right kind of things, or fear at the right kind of things, or sadness, or even joy and love, these all become compromised. And this, in turn, affects how we make decisions. So let's look at each of these in turn, starting with the solar plexus. When this gets disrupted, when the function of this isn't allowed to complete, or there's an energetic block to it. Now this could be a big trauma, or imagine a child with an emotional processing over time, and they're repeatedly mini traumatized by being told, hurry up, don't take so long, you should be quicker with your decisions, get on with it, make a move, we can't hang around forever. Even down to little epithets like the early bird catches the worm. It's like disallowing this emotional process. So this function stops working, it gets suppressed, and that inability to use that center to make decisions also creates further disruption in the body. So a trauma wound in one of these authority centers is a really deep, fundamental loss of trust in one's own inner knowing. So for the solar plexus center, we get emotional dysregulation. Now this can come in all sorts of forms, where people don't have the ability to contain their own emotionality over time, to wait for the point of clarity. So these people get kind of hyper and overexcited and jump into things when the emotional wave is at the top point, and then wonder why everything feels very chaotic again later. Or they avoid making a decision because they're kind of always going, well, I don't know, because this wave process just keeps going on and on. They never are able to come to a point of clarity because the process itself has been disrupted. There's an awful lot in trauma about emotional dysregulation and this inability to contain emotions and move through them and let the emotional processes complete. And as I said earlier, this is 50% of our population on the world at this time make their healthy decisions this way. So it's a big one, this one. Then we'll move on to the sacral center, the center of sexuality and vitality. And a trauma wound here, if it's a sexual trauma, then people lose their sense of trust in their inner yes-no, their inner sense of whether to engage or to actually say no. And most often what happens is it's the sense of no that gets wounded, because it gets overridden. If it's a single trauma, then often there can be a lot of shame about the fact that somehow the person wasn't able to say no to this experience. It overwhelmed them. Or if it was a sexual abuse, that they didn't stand up and say no to something that inside they felt was not right. It felt wrong inside in their inner authority, and yet that was overridden. So this leads to a suppressed life force. The life force, instead of kind of healthily pulsing and being able to go out into the world, turns in and begins to decay and gets suppressed. And this authority works, again, in the present moment. So the inability to say no to things means you're saying yes to the wrong things, and then that energy gets further depleted and further worn out. Go on now to the spleen center. For people who have this as their authority, This is about survival instinct in the present moment. And trauma has been shown to deeply disturb our ability to stay present in the moment. So when you can't stay present in the moment, where are you? Well, you're dissociated off into the past, off into the future, just not able to connect with that inner sense of what's healthy in the moment. So that trauma energy cuts this connection to this sense of survival. And then, of course, again, people are making the kind of decisions that are not healthy for them. And as soon as you start to do that, that again has a knock-on effect through the whole of the rest of the body. The heart, or sometimes called the will center, it's about willpower and commitment. And just think, we know what we mean when we say somebody has a broken will. Yeah, there's a lack of life in them. There's a lack of sense of being able to actually have agency in the world, exert their will, and have that complete as something successful. A lot of the kind of like the toddler tantrums around 2 years old is they begin to exert their will and encounter resistance and that whole process. If this is your authority, and there's a very small number of people for whom this is actually their authority, but the same sense of broken will can apply in other ways. But if it's your authority, then this is really key, because that sense of your own willpower and agency and ability to make a healthy commitment is just disrupted and it withers away. And so there's no way of making a decision, knowing whether you're going to be able to make a commitment. And what happens here is that then there's a very low self-worth, low self-esteem comes in, which just further diminishes this energy in the heart center. And the last one of the actual authority centers is the G center, also known as the self center, love, identity, and direction. So here we're going to see wounds, trauma wounds of depersonalization, not being able to connect with a solid sense of who you are, or a deep wound in the sense of being lovable, not knowing that you can be lovable or you can love. And this is going to disrupt this sense of being able to trust your own direction, trust your own inner GPS to guide you moment by moment and decision by decision. So you don't get that sense of, I know myself, I know who I am, I can trust myself. The identity gets taken over by what other people have told you you should be, what other people have said they want from you. And this just atrophies. So when these wounds happen at the authority level, then this ability to make decisions is severely compromised. So instead of using your own inner authority, what happens is then you go into the mind, and the mind takes over with learned adaptive strategies. This is part of our neuroplasticity that is great, but it also is it's our greatest strength and our greatest weakness, because we are adapt to our environment. When we're brought up in a family that doesn't recognize our ability to process emotionally, we're told to hurry up, don't take so much time, we adapt. So we create an adaptive strategy that says, right, I'm going to use my mind to make these decisions. I know what's wanted from me, so I'm just going to make any decision just as long as I do it quickly, because that'll please everybody else. And the mind just gets so anxious at the end of the day doing this, because it's divorced from the whole body sense that goes with it of what's right. In fact, often it's not completely separated. So there's enough connection between like the mind and the body to know, I'm making this decision, but it doesn't feel right for me. And this is how the trauma perpetuates and the anxiety builds, because you keep making decisions that your body on some level is kind of going, no, this doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel healthy. This doesn't feel loving. This doesn't feel I've got the energy for it. This doesn't feel like my will is in it. And the body becomes depressed from this long-term dysregulation and suppression of the inner guidance. And then the mind creates more chemical disruption in the body, which in turn actually just increases the anxiety. So we build up this kind of loop, feedback loop, we're not trusting the body, not able to trust the body because it's so full of this dysregulated energy that we can't find any truth in it. So we have to keep using the mind. And the more we use the mind, the more our body suffers. I put here analysis paralysis, because we cannot work these things out with our mind, or every time we make a decision from our mind, we're actually going further and further and further away from ourselves, where we know ourselves, where we can connect with ourselves. So the path back to health is begin to feel what was separated. So if you have solar plexus authority, begin to reconnect with your feelings. Begin to reconnect with that sense that it's okay to feel and let those feelings flow. Now often, the trauma has to be very carefully titrated. The word titration means taking tiny, tiny, tiny pieces, so as not to go into the overwhelm again and into the shock and re-shock. It's about taking tiny, tiny, tiny pieces of that trauma feeling until eventually you get enough of it kind of taken out that the whole thing begins to disintegrate. So from a foundation of safety and containment, this titration can begin to happen. And then as this, we set up another kind of feedback loop. So say you start with a foundation of safety and containment, and often this is safety found with somebody else. It's not, you can't yet trust your own body, so it's having somebody else who is able to be in a regulated self-bodily trust space that you can begin to do this titration. And then you begin to connect with your own authority, and the more you connect with your own authority and begin to use that for your decisions, the more health energy you start to put back into the body, the more everything begins to come back into that sense of that homeostasis. Now obviously there are still going to be triggers, this is what happens with trauma, but when you know your path back to your own inner authority and to trust that, then you can begin to navigate those triggers and those things that seem to just come up and relive. You can navigate your way through them by being able to say, I know this energy here, this anxiety in my mind is not able to make a decision for me. So therefore I'm not going to act on that mental anxiety. I'm not going to do anything to try and make that go away by making a decision. I will make the decision from another place, my own inner authority. And so this is what I really use the map here, if you like, the blueprint of what's underneath our life experiences. What is it that we can come home to, that we can depend on, we can rely on, so as to begin to reconnect with that essential part of us that knows how to be alive, knows how to be alive in this body, in the world. Once you made that connection, that kind of just like begins to spread, and it begins to take on more and more energy to itself. And so you gradually expand the space of safety in your body, and so the trauma kind of recedes and the triggers become more manageable, less scary, and eventually diminish. And I'm not saying that making decisions in this way is totally easy, or getting back to this place is easy. But it is worth doing because, as I say, once you reconnect with that inner sense of aliveness, this is where, your spirit can begin to come alive again. Your spirit can live in your body rather than needing to keep it somewhere hanging out to the side here where it can't really quite live in your body. And this is what sometimes people who've been traumatized will say. It's like, I'm not inside myself, I'm somewhere else. Dissociation, depersonalization, things like PTSD, they all take you away from the sense of being connected into your body. So this is a really valuable and helpful map to know where to guide people back to this inner connection in themselves and learn how to trust this and work with it and expand it out. So I hope you found that helpful. If you want to read more or know more, then please do reach out to me, connect with me on Facebook, Alive Spirit with Mary and May, or through my website up there on the top right, marianmay.co.uk. I'm always happy to have a discussion with you, either about human design, help you get started with human design, or if you've been working with it for a while but find it difficult to connect with this authority, then perhaps what's happened is you have one of these kind of authority traumas. And I'll be willing to talk to you about how we could begin to work that through so that you can actually connect with your inner authority. So that's all for now. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye for now.